Act 1. The Seed of Betrayal. The youthful ironclad knight hid her expression beneath the demon-like helmet. It was clear to an outsider that while one could not read her emotions on her face, they could sense the anger within her voice.
This cannot be allowed. Are you sure your informants speak only truths?
Betrayal at the hand of a friend hurt. Betrayal by family sets the blood akin flame. Mordred felt the knife plunge into her heart, and to make matters worse, the knife had begun twisting by the sadistic owner. Since the first day that she joined the Round Table, there was a heavy degree of animosity that the King of Camelot directed at her. It was subtle, condescending way of speaking that could be hidden in the guise of a mentor. Her father had shown no lack of emotion, or willingness to even speak with her. There was no moment of friendly compassion, only a face with no expression that reflected human emotion. She always wore that iron mask to avoid making a human connection. As the various slights against her began to stack, this recent to her name was the final tipping point in the tower she had kept in her memory. The temptress, who stood in front of her, coaxed the ferocious lion to a state of calmness. While they were alone, there was no point in erupting a tantrum.
While my words hurt to listen, realize that your path to the throne has been accelerated. God has heard our begging, my dear Mordred. Can't you see that?
Temptress was more than happy when she had heard the information spread throughout the shipyard. The journey of a young foreigner from a kingdom across the ocean was coming to marry King Arthur. The sea traders spoke of the distant foreign prince, Prince Arslan, who hailed from the kingdom of Pars. It was to her understanding that Pars had recently entered a state of war against the kingdom of Lusitania and suffered a major defeat. The kingdom's capital of Ecbatana was lost to the enemy, and Prince Arslan had taken the role of a temporary head of state for his kingdom in a small fortress named Peshawar. The most concerning part about this information of his arrival was she did not know it beforehand. King Arthur had not disclosed this marriage proposal to the Round Table nor the Council of Nobles. She stopped listening to the endless barrage of insults Mordred had directed at the king and took a moment to focus on the court.
It bothers me so that the Round Table was not officially briefed by Arslan's arrival and proposal. Agravain had not mentioned anything in our latest exchange. Could he have been compromised?
The Temptress continues to rule out possible informants who could have turned on her until her thoughts were forced out of concentration by this petulant brat's whining about fairness.
Don't you agree, Lafay? I am more worthy to sit on the throne than any feeble runt those two creeps. I have the right to the throne as the king's eldest child.
It was through this continuous screaming that Mordred's armor had been stripped away, and all that remained was the face of a young girl whose heart was hurt. Morgan Le Fay pitied her. The child deserved a semblance of acknowledgement from her father, but Le Fay was not going to attempt to fix this relationship. Instead, she was going to exploit the heat of passion. King Arthur, the emotionless ruler of Camelot, could not busy herself with the tender emotions of her child. Illegitimate child. Le Fay approached Mordred and immediately cupped her face between her smooth palms.
While you are the eldest spawn of King Arthur, you have not been recognized as a legitimate child.
Those words stung the young knight.
You will never have the glory of becoming the king through your father. In the eyes of the public, you are merely a bastard born in a pig stable.
Horrible words that cut deeper than any blade could. Le Fay took notice of the drawn sword that rested just between her bosom.
I should cut you down right where you stand, witch. I've had it with the slander directed at me.
The witch chuckled in response. The ferocious attitude this young cub demonstrated was better put on the battlefield, not politicking in the shadows.
Now, my future king.
Le Fay waved Clarent away from her chest and herded Mordred back into a loving embrace.
Forgive me for overstepping my bounds, my king. We must focus on the true enemy who will be at our most vulnerable in the coming days.
She pulled away from the novice apprentice and was now formulating a plan for the near future. As it stands, 2 armies needed to be raised to counter the inner and outer working of the king's court.
I believe King Arthur has put us in the dark with this proposal. I believe Gawain, being the king's right-hand man, is more than knowledgeable of this proposal. We cannot stop the marriage as has been decided, but we can stop the actors.
Mordred only listened to her mentor's words.
Agravain will surely back our cause, as the hatred he holds for Arthur is the greatest out of all of us. He is my primary ears in the king's court, which should prove resourceful. Lancelot is another weak-hearted fool pressured by the touch of flesh. It has become apparent that he cares for King Arthur, not just as a knight, but a man to a woman.
Buffet gave the both of them enough space so that her icy cold eyes could stare into the young lion's heart.
New Camelot will have a need for talent after members of the court are removed. A kingdom with no ruler and your subjects yearn to be filled.
Mordred understood. She had been quietly rearing the men assigned to her company to follow her words, not the king's. An army of loyal soldiers who would follow her into the throne to claim her rightful place in the kingdom.
I will go ahead and start amassing a larger support of my own. My men do not take kindly to foreigners who waltz into our lands. Furthermore, I will report to you the members of the court who will surely push back against the claims of the throne.
Buffet offered no response except for a slight bow, and began her exit. The plan was now set in motion as the arrival of Prince Arslan would become the boiling point within Camelot. A broken family that never attempted to mend the emotional bridge would cause a strife so great that Camelot, its people, and the Round Table would surely not survive. Act 2. The Prince's Doubt. The port city of Gilan glistened with the reflection of the deep blue sea. The city was just beginning to stabilize the recent change of leadership that had forced the current viceroy out of power. Gilan breathed its first air of equality amongst all men and allowed fair trade and taxes to appease the masses. We set our sights on the mansion atop the tallest point of the city, where a long line of citizens extend out of the front doors. At the center of the commotion is Prince Arslan, who sits upon his throne while discussing the long line of complaints aimed at the former viceroy and redistributing the unjustly uncollected taxes. Shaghad, the former viceroy, was cruel, and Arslan could not allow a corrupt goblin to continue to ruin this city under his thumb. He understood the emotions of the people and acted as their representative. It was indeed a tedious role as the sun made a complete run from sunrise to sunset. The finances had been tallied, and Arslan's head was on the brink of exploding as he raised himself off the throne and was greeted by a busy Narcissus who was reading a letter.
Have you come to enjoy the position of viceroy, my lord?
Arslan heard that bit of sarcasm in his advisor's voice and shook his head.
I think the task of counting and controlling finances is better suited for a native of Gilan.
While Arslan enjoyed speaking with the citizenry and bringing them a sense of fairness, being an accountant of the city was becoming too taxing. Narcissus looked up from his letter and offered a reciprocal smile.
It seems like you're in luck. The King of Camelot has agreed to our proposal and requires your presence within the next 90 days so that you may both wed.
The young prince could not believe this new revelation as they both continued to the dining hall, where the rest of his compatriots were seated. The news had shocked Arslan, as he half expected for the proposal to be flat out rejected. He barely touched his food, restricting himself to only a few sips from the finest wine that Gilan had to offer. Narcissus placed the letter within his robes, and saw that the prince was less than happy at the contract he had to fulfill.
You have barely touched your food, my lord. Are you feeling well?
Funny enough, Narcissus' wife tugged at his elbow. Daryun, from the other side of the table, quickly snapped back. He knew better than any of the rest of why Arslan was so troubled.
Just because marriage.
Keep
I'm
going.
sorry. Just keep going.
Keep going.
Just because marriage can come to you easily does not mean it's the same for everyone.
The black knight's eyes focused on...
What does that read?
That was pretty good.
That was really good. Okay, yeah. Who he had married within less than an hour. In response to the glare, the woman stuck out her tongue. Arslan saw that his lack of appetite was bringing concern and forced a piece of pork down his throat.
There's no need to worry, Daryun. This is what kings and princes do all the time. If I do not choose who to marry, then my father would eventually decide. I just never imagined myself marrying this soon in my journey, especially to someone I have not even met in person.
Narcissus closed his eyes and lamented on the situation he had forced Arslan into. Wars are won through people. Heroism and chivalry, on its own, are not enough to have an ensured victory.
Marriages for the common man are rooted in love, whether it be lustful advance or genuine happiness. The two have control over the life they seek to want. They both, as commoners, will not have much to gain. The rich marry amongst themselves to gain a greater financial reward. While it might be cynical as the heads of families are the ones marrying their sons to others' daughters, the point of their marriage is to secure financial stability for the generations to come. You, Prince Arslan, a nobleman are restricted. Marriage and nobility is not just for financial funding, but for lands and political capital. It is why you never see a king, such as your father, marrying a woman from the streets. The point of marriage among nobles is to remain in power, and have their children remain in power. It is not fair, my lord, in the sense of a virgin love, but our current situation has forced us into this predicament. We must fulfill your father, King Andragoras' promise.
It had been some weeks now that Prince Arslan had been sent by his father, King Andragoras, to find thousands of men to aid him in the retaking of their home capital of Ecbatana. As fate would have it, the port city of Gilan was Arslan's key to finding more men to bulk his army and bring back glory to the kingdom of Pars. It was from there that Arslan and his company learned from the sea traders of a legendary kingdom filled with knights, steel-plated armor, that was situated just beyond the horizon. The profaned capital of Camelot was just waiting to be reached out by Arslan. From there, Narcissus began communicating through envoys to the King of Camelot herself, and established a friendly relationship between Camelot and the kingdom of Pars. It was also through Narcissus' quick wit that it was agreed upon that Prince Arslan was to marry King Arthur, a marriage of nobility, as Camelot would promise to send aid to the battlefield, and in return, Pars would give a portion of the captured lands of Lusitania to the kingdom of Great Britain. Prince Arslan looked at the cup of wine once more and remembered the brief exchanges he had with Narcissus on the idea of marrying this faraway king. His thoughts were interrupted upon the hearing of resources.
From the numbers that King Arthur has provided me, Camelot would send enough knights to bolster our fighting force tenfold. The Lusitanians would buckle by the sheer number and quality of these determined knights.
By all angles, the acceptance of the marriage proposal was joyous news, because it would allow for their people to retake their home capital. But still, Arslan felt a degree of insincerity when he thought about his future.
I understand that this is my duty to my kingdom and my father, but I cannot force myself feelings for someone I don't know. Has the rest of my life been decided already?
It was not irregular for most noblemen boys to go through a self-identity crisis when their would-be wives had already reached the mere age of 15.
Marriage comes at times we least expect it. The King of Camelot is fully aware of our situation here, and will allow discretion in the union between the both of you. From the contract that we had signed off on, you will be given a total of 90 days to enter a holy matrimony in the city of Camelot. Those days have already started counting, mind you. From the moment we enter their ports, we must proceed in haste to marry the two of you, and rush to your father's assault on Ecbatana.
The words still had not comforted the young prince, as Narcissus offered another reassuring smile.
There is no need to worry about going to this foreign land. Dariun and I will be by your side every step of the way. You will be safe.
Arslan was put at peace by the last statement. If he had no advisor when discussing with the king the amount of troops and supplies he would need, he would surely make a mistake. Holding on to a new, fragile conviction, he pushed the remaining thoughts to the back of his head and began to eat. The morning of, Prince Arslan, the advisor Narcissus, and the Black Knight Dariun all entered a boat that would sail out to the kingdom of knights ruled by King Arthur. On the docks, the minstrel Give watched in sorrow. He had not been allowed to join them in their journey as he wanted to taste the women across the sea. Prince Arslan shifted his gaze to the horizon as their ship began to sail forward. In those few moments, he pondered on what it meant to love. Did love require a degree of devotion, or could it survive purely on physical wanting? These were the thoughts that clouded his mind as the journey had just begun. Narcissus and Dariun stared at their young prince. The Black Knight spoke briskly.
The preparations you have ordered have been set accordingly. By the time we hit nightfall, the supporting ships will set sail from Galen.
Narcissus stared back at the port city and accounted for the number of men that would be needed for the soon-to-be battle.
These knights are ferocious, Dariun. I have heard one of them in particular is able to control the sun by a swing of his blade.
The Black Knight only let out a stifled laugh.
I think the information you hear from these sea traders is mingling in with the gossip, my friend.
Narcissus did not take the jab lightly.
You must protect the prince at all costs. From the moment we set off this boat to when we step back on it to return to Gilan.
It was a strict scolding, but one Dariun had repeated in his head several times, even before today.
I will continue to protect the prince, always.
Act 3. Camelot was a city of law. It was clear that the townsfolk obliged the rules set forth by King Arthur, almost religiously. In short, Camelot was ruled by the perfect king. From the moment Arslan's company stepped off the docks, all they heard was the endless chattering on how perfect life was in this city. For a brief moment, Arslan could not help but feel dejected at how happy these people were. Camelot reminded him of his childhood in Ecbatana, a fruitful land of resources and stability. As the prince and company rode on horseback all the way to the main castle gates, Arslan took notice of a glaring difference between Pars and Camelot. He turned his attention to Narcissus.
I have not seen slaves at all, Narcissus, yet this kingdom is arguably even better off than Pars.
Narcissus knew that the prince would take attention to the subtle difference of the labor force.
That is indeed true, my lord. Camelot does not use slaves, but rather a system of indentured servitude that allows for a person to either submit themselves to the work or to choose another career. Nobility here also uses the system of feudalism where the king and lower lords can command vassals. It truly is a cultural difference away from Pars. It shows that there can be a freeland while not being a country founded on war-mongering religious persecution, such as the Lusitanians.
Arslan grew more interested in these methods of labor and placed the thought somewhere in the back of his mind when he would speak with King Arthur. As they continued up a cobblestone path, the townsfolk would whisper by how gallant the Black Knight Daryun was. Comparisons between himself and the noble knight Lancelot were viciously discussed on the topic of who looked more handsome. However, while some of the voices seemed generally positive, Arslan heard words drenched in disgust. Foreigner. Arslan could not target the speaker. Is this runt really going to be our king? The endless chatter they would hear would never cease until they reached the main gate. The escort they had been following since the dock turned his head to face them. You have been given the talk of the town, Prince Arslan. It is a rare occasion to see these many new faces. I should give you the hindsight, however, that the king's court has been split on this marriage proposal. Arslan was shocked by the news. He had assumed that the entirety of Camelot had agreed to this momentous union. Narcissus interjected himself before Arslan could be allowed to mutter a question.
It was on short notice. However, the king has made her rule and will honor it, as you knights do so often.
The escort sneered at the advisor and continued forward. Before he knew it, Arslan entered the throne room and was in awe at the regal nature of not only the throne room or the king, but that it was imparted on every single knight as well. Ironclad knights lined the wall, still as stone. Just beyond these doors were the King of Camelot herself, King Arthur, who sat in her throne, offering only a stare back at the visitors and soon-to-be husband. On each side of the king were three knights that reflected the same stare that a lion would. On her right side stood Sirs Gawain, Tristan, and Bedivere. On the left stood Sir Lancelot, Agravain, and Mordred. Each of these knights had tales that glorified their abilities almost to the point of supernatural. Arslan was the first to approach and felt all eyes land on him. Daryun and Narcissus remained just behind him on both sides, to not only offer protection, but mental stability. The stares these knights would imprint on Arslan was more intimidating than his own angry father. The worst stare down was with his soon-to-be wife, King Arthur. She raised herself off the throne and descended down the few steps. The future couple was only distracted by 2 feet, as this was the first time he looked over her face. She was not an overzealous barbarian, nor a warmongering centurion warrior. Every inch of her body was the definition of what a divine king would look like.
King Arthur, you're shorter than I expected.
The knights behind Arthur widened their eyes at the gravest of insults he had just stated at their king. Even Daryun felt surprised at the comment that had been let loose. King Arthur, however, continued her aggressive stare before relaxing her brow.
Prince Arslan, I imagine someone older.
After the quick retort, Daryun shifted his eyes toward Narcissus with the intention, "This was all you're doing, wasn't it?" Arslan had been given a briefing on how to act with the soon-to-be wife by none other than Narcissus himself.
You are not going to Camelot to attempt to woo the heart of the king to fall in love with you? That's not a question, is it?
That's fine. Narcissus raised the letter that they had been sent before embarking on their journey.
This letter is proof you have agreed to marry already. The formalities are not needed. Instead, warm up to your wife. I heard King Arthur is quite the beauty. Some compare her to the fabled Holy Grail.
The exchanging of playful quips at each other, Arslan and his company bowed before the king as she invited them for hospitality.
Greetings, King Arthur. I am Prince Arslan, son of King Androgarus, the King of Pars.
Before the young prince could continue his introduction, the black-armored knight, Agravain, cut through these words.
King of Pars, rather more than what's left of it. A heap of dirt and one fortress.
Arslan's company took great offense at the insulting of their king, but Arslan kept them in check. Before he could offer a response to the blunt knight, King Arthur raised her voice without even facing back towards him.
You would do well to keep your tongue in check, Agravain.
It was far too late as the comment had left a sour taste in Arslan's company, especially in a disgruntled Daryun. The ferocity of the fierce tiger general showed through his eyes. It was clear that both parties would remember the insult. King Arthur could sense the growing tension in the room, and raised her voice to bring all attention to her. Knights of the Round Table should not meddle in political issues.
I believe it has been about 8 days since your departure from Galan, has it not? You have come to fulfill your oath within the 90 days?
Arslan raised himself to meet eye to eye with the king. She truly was short.
As explained by my advisor Narcissus, I have come to marry you, King Arthur.
Prince Arslan felt a tinge of guilt as before he even arrived he doubted whether this was the woman he wanted to marry. However, standing before her now, he cannot help but embrace her as two lovers would. It was when their eyes met that he had seen the disturbing truth to the king. The eyes. He had expected King Arthur's eyes to be filled with care and sympathy, and stayed a little hollow, and lacked an appreciation for human emotion. Eyes that could see the image, but ignored the color. Arslan could not stare deeply into her eyes, as it had become unsettling. The knight, Agravain, cleared his throat to gather the court's attention, this time with a more angered tone.
My king, I ask you to reconsider the sanctity of Camelot and her people. You have gone behind the advice of the council. Don't even consider your round table as a mediator to this contract. Camelot does not take kindly to foreign rule.
King's words were absolute, always. The other knights turned their heads to their boisterous comrade. Some had a look of approval, others fearful for his disobedience, and one Mordred whose face continued to be masked under her helmet. King Arthur turned her attention to Agravain once more. Those same unsettling eyes needed to command just once for her people to follow.
You will remain quiet for the remainder of this meeting, sir. If this angers you, then leave. I have no need to listen to dissent on action I've already taken.
Embarrassed, Gravian let out a snarl and made his exit towards one of the back doors of the throne room. King Arthur turned one last time to Arslan and walked a few steps forward to the point where she could hold his hand.
I apologize for the outburst of my knight. This decision I have taken has been one I did not tell anyone.
Arslan now understood the feelings of resentment that he felt from the townsfolk and Agravain, but was still bothered on why this proposal had been kept a secret from the majority of the decision-makers. Delicate fingers that intertwined with his ran a mellow warmth throughout his body. Infatuation was easy to prove, but reaching love proved to be more difficult.
You and your men must be tired. I have ordered my men to prepare the barracks for your arrival. Prince Arslan, your two advisors and yourself will have rooms inside of the castle itself.
Arslan nodded at the accommodations that were set.
You have my thanks, King Arthur. I am deeply humbled by how you have treated us.
The king offered a smile towards her soon-to-be husband.
Isn't that how a wife should act toward her husband?
In the gripped hand they still held, they began walking towards the same exit. Agravain had left out. At a moment's notice, Daryun walked just behind Arslan, as it was his sworn duty to protect him. On the opposite end, Sir Gawain marched just behind his king, showing the same degree of loyalty and protection that Daryun would. Arslan found the similarities to be comical. Either they draw their swords on each other, or together as comrades. Act 4. As proper necessities go for grand weddings, a hunting party was established between Sir Gawain and Daryun to hunt enough food for court on the day of marriage. While Daryun conversed with Sir Tristan on the details of his bow, Arslan rode side by side with Gawain. My men tell me of the victory your Black Knight had in Sindura against an ogre.
A brute taller than Sir Lancelot and larger than you, sir. The man was comparable to an oxen.
We of the Knights of Camelot are famed for defeating dragons. I wonder if your finest warrior would compete such a thing.
We never had the opportunity to face a dragon before. We believed they were only legends, but coming here we were mistaken.
As the two continued telling tales of their various events, Arslan focused his thoughts on King Arthur. Your advisor, Narcissus, has informed me of your father's love for slavery. King Andragoras, another delusional man who thinks that slavery will make the world complete. Camelot is not completely innocent of a mimicry of labor, Arslan. We have indentured servitude that completes the role of cheap labor. We pride ourselves on the fact that these individuals have a choice in the matter of their future, not being born into it. Slavery is more akin to barbarism. My question to you is whether or not you believe that slavery is essential to Pars.
My father understands that our country's fruits come from the twisted tree of slavery. While I do not share the same belief, I believe
that your father will think he has a foothold in our kingdom to introduce slavery here. If you think that will be allowed, then I consider it for you to think twice on your loyalty to your father or to your wife.
I've argued several times throughout my life for the need of abolition. I do not intend to extend slavery to your shores. If my father does, then I will speak with him and to reconsider.
To go against the king's word is treasonous. If you are so willing to go against your king of a father, how do I not know you will not betray your word on the king of your wife?
Gawain, I mean no disrespect and loyalty to your king. The abolition of slavery is an important belief that I strive to achieve. I will have no other exceptions except for that cause.
You care about your people through your strong emotions, Arslan. I commend you for it, but I strongly disagree with the union of your ideals and King Arthur's. She has ruled Camelot with the perfect rule, as she always has, and it has worked efficiently.
If what you say is true of the king's lack of human empathy, how can any knight follow King Arthur if she cannot understand?
Hold your tongue, Prince. You may be of nobility, but you have no right to question the king's rule.
You follow your king without question. The duty of a knight is to remain loyal to the king. That is correct. However, as a knight, you do a disservice when you cannot point out the flaws of the king. Compliance to the incorrect is the same as doing the action.
The duty of a knight is to become the vassal of the king and nothing more. Knights follow obedience to their king because that is their duty. We follow King Arthur's divine rule. How are you to question the divine's rule?
I question it because it is not a trait that will help your kingdom in the long run. Is it fair to say that knights in your court do not support King Arthur? How many dissatisfied voices are there who do not see her as the king they want to follow, instead are conspiring to follow another?
The two continued to ride deeper into the woods, as Gawain would stubbornly reject Arslan's arguments. However, Arslan's last statement he made was true, more than he could ever believe. Act 5. The days of preparation were coming to a close as Arslan and Daryun wandered throughout the streets of Camelot and saw for themselves the impact of the king's perfect rule. From what they could gather from the various conversations of the townfolk they had, the king's rule was truly perfect.
It seems like King Arthur has a perfect rule. Wouldn't you say, Daryun?
King Arthur is not a perfect king. She may be everything she says she is, but she lacks one trait that every king should know.
Arslan turned to his knight and thought of the various answers to the riddle. King Arthur was a king, a comrade, a warrior, a ruler, even a wife, never knowing the defeat on the battlefield, but he still could not answer it.
Prince Arslan, when someone spends their entire life atop the hill, they forget the climb they took in the first place.
You're starting to sound like Narcissus, Daryun.
King Arthur does not know what defeat is. She has never felt a shred of humility in her life, and this now what makes us human. The human experience is to struggle and overcome. I think the greatest rulers come from those who have understood the plight of the commoner. The lion has grown arrogant by her abilities and has forgotten how to be empathetic to people she rules. With all due respect to your future wife, she reminds me of King Ardragoras. I believe the two would naturally run into conflict.
There is no need to apologize. I've noted the same fault in her rulership. Hope that I can come to change that in her beliefs in the near future.
He once again reflected on this first encounter, the throne room. She radiated perfect beauty, intimidation just by a glance of her figure with the holy sword by her side. What shattered that perception of perfection was the barren eyes she held.
Eyes that did not show compassion or emotion. Those eyes are not the eyes of a king who commits actions on behalf of the people, but for the good of the people. What is the role of a king? To act as the speaker of the people, or rather act in place of the people, because the king will always know better.
Prince Arslan, give yourself more credit. You will be a great king one day because you care about your people. You do not just see them as a duty, but someone you could have in your mess hall. Human compassion is what changes the perception of a divine ruler to one humanitics, one that is needed for the sake of the people.
Aryun bit into a core of an apple and saw that it was finished. Arslan as well had finished his apple as they looked for a place to throw them away. This small search had them entering a trader's makeshift shop of curtains. Just before Arslan took another step inside following Aryun, his eyes shifted back towards the street. A crowd of townspeople were circling two horses that had no riders. Arslan paid little attention to the possible individuals and entered the shop.
Should I purchase a gift for the king?
You would think she would be happy with a portion of cars as a gift. If you would wish, we could find her a small gift.
Arslan walked through the maze of items until he set his eyes on the perfect gift.
My prince, perhaps a gift of more value should serve better?
This is exactly what she would like.
Well, I guess as a romantic gesture, she will not question the sincerity of it, I'm sure.
As they began their exit outside of the curtains, Aryun immediately put his hand out in front of Arslan. He had not seen the enemy yet, but could feel the bloodlust emanating just past the fabric.
Stay on guard.
As Aryun stepped forward out of the curtains, he was greeted by two knights, while a semicircle of townsfolk watched from a distance.
Name yourself. Who are you?
Questions were unimportant as Aryun remembered the armor of the Black Knight before him, the same one who had his outburst in court when they first arrived, Sir Agravain of the Round Table. However, the second individual, who was completely masked in iron, was the larger threat. The two knights had immediately drawn their swords as they came face to face with their adversary. In response, Aryun raised the black spear he was known for charging with on the battlefield. A crackle of red lightning sparked off the Iron Knight's armor. Arslan walked through the curtains and saw his attackers, immediately recognizing Agravain. The Black Knight of Camelot walked forward to the mill ground. It is under the advice and decision of the Council and Round Table that you leave Camelot. We have decided to postpone your marriage and let the request flow through the proper channels of our bureaucracy. If you do not leave on your own will, then you will be forced out.
The king been informed of your actions, Sir Agravain.
The king has not been informed as this matter is under political jurisdiction. Will you leave, or will we be forced to make you leave? Aryun did not pay attention at all to Agravain's request, but raised his spear as if accepting the challenge. Any inexperienced fighter could tell that the true threat was the quiet one.
By process of elimination, I assume you to be Mordred. Is that correct?
The Iron Knight nodded, refusing to exchange pleasantries with Aryun. He turned his stare to the chatterbox of the two.
Prince Arslan has a duty to commit to your majesty. It is a contradictory duty that parties will not fail in completing.
A contract that has no enforcement and no approval of the kingdom. Camelot will not be ruled by a foreigner and an eventual half-breed son.
How about the mute over here, Augrin? Do they wish to voice their dissatisfaction with Arslan and Arthur's union?
That white-haired maiden who you protect has no place in my future kingdom.
Are you the dog of this treacherous Black Knight, Evergreen?
Mordred roared in fury and sprung forward with a rising slash which would cut Aryun into two pieces from head to toe. Aryun responded with a quick overhead block through the shaft of the black spear. Their faces met inches away as the weapons above remained locked in battle.
I never seen a knight as short as you filled with such murderous intent.
Even if he could not see the anger behind the helmet, the insult had landed. Mordred pushed Aryun off balance to regain her posture for a second strike. Arslan retreated back to the entrance of the cellar's curtain as he walked intently on the ability of the Round Table Knights. Agravain likewise took notice of the overflowing hatred Mordred held towards Daryun and retreated a few paces back. As Daryun fell to the ground, his right hand caught his fall and exchanged a swift kick at Mordred's wrist to reflect away the lowered slash. His feet recovered back to his upright position as he neared forward, spear raised aiming at piercing Mordred's abdomen. 2 quick jabs were reflected away by the Iron Knight as she shook her wrists violently. The kick had surprisingly stunned. Daryun offered a quick jab as an overhead slash came quickly down over the Black Knight. Fortunately, though, enough thinking, Daryun raised the spear over his head to block it. While the helmet refused to show the true face of their adversary, Daryun could see the eyes of rage beneath. From that moment, they entered a skirmish. They charged at each other once again as exchanges of jabs and swings were either blocked, reflected, or missed entirely. Daryun blocked parallel to his body as Clarent continued to hack away at his unbreakable metal spear that it was made out of. With all his might, Daryun pushed away the swing to his side and broke his opponent's balance. While a suit of iron is protective, you must account for its weight. In one swift movement, he spun the spear so that the end of the black pole rammed straight into the falling knight's helmet. A loud metal ringing vibrated through the air as Mordred's helmet flew into the air and was left with a naked face with a fractured nose. Daryun saw the face of the enemy and was initially shocked. Arslan as well, but for other reasons.
You bastard, I'll have your head.
I did not know I was fighting a woman. Apologies for breaking apart your face.
It couldn't be. She looks just like the king.
Thoughts of a possible child were circling his head as the sound of metal against metal rang around. Daryun had now played on the defensive and Mordred's speed was given free range without the weight of armor. He suffered several cuts to his side and arms as he pulled away and handed the spear away to Arslan. Daryun now drew his sword as the two locked in place at the center of battle, sparks flying in all directions as the graceful movements of Daryun were matched only by Mordred's brutish slams of power. The enraged bull has lost sight of what she was originally fighting for and now only pictured the Black Knight dead at her feet. At the same time, Agravain took notice of Prince Arslan's position and ordered 2 knights to kidnap him while his protector was busy. Immediately, Daryun saw the subtle movements of his enemies on the perimeter and regained the manner of unorthodox fighting by grabbing Mordred's sword arm, stalling her movements, and violently headbutting her once more to knock her off balance. In one clean swing, his sword came down upon her face and ended her life. The body of the knight fell to the ground as a crumpled mess as he reactively reached his backside and threw the knife he hid to plunge straight into the head of one of the attackers. Arslan, now seeing this danger near him, pulled his blade and killed the second kidnapper. Agravain, in complete disbelief, saw Mordred bleeding profusely on the ground, knowing full well that the knight would no longer stand. How in the world does one hand have this much talent? Daryun approached his prince and kneeled.
Are you alright, Prince Arslan?
The two tended to each other as Agravain was on the verge of ordering all his men to attack and to join the battle. Suddenly, a distant bell could be heard from the background, and Agravain cursed under his breath. City Watch, damn you. The knights in the semicircle dispersed into secrecy as Agravain picked up the fallen body of Mordred and rushed off to the sea of onlookers. The gear was now turning as the finale of this insurrection was drawing near. Act 6. Our attention now focuses on the hallways of the castle as Sir Lancelot approaches the doorway to King Arthur's room in a heat of passion. It was through the advisal of Morgan Le Fay that Lancelot should seek his king's hand in marriage, before the day of the wedding. As a last-ditch effort to proclaim his love to her, he stands just outside of her door where he contemplates his next action, knowing full well that regardless of whatever the king says, their relationship will no longer be the same. Quick tap on the wooden door is answered with a "come in." King Arthur, initially surprised, stands in her bedroom at the fact that it was Lancelot who appeared. It was typically a maid or a night watcher, but regardless of who it was, she was pleased at his company. The purple-armored knight dropped to one knee at the sight of her and lowered his head. This would be his one and only chance to persuade his king to fall into her arms, not some foreigners.
My king, I have been by your side at every campaign Camelot has waged. At every banquet, at every moment of importance in your kingship, I have been there. The knight inside of me tells me to stop talking, but the man beneath this shaking armor cannot hold himself back.
Tell me, Sir Lancelot, what pains you so? Tell me of your crown, and I may help you clarify.
My king, I love you. I've loved you since the day I first set my eyes on you. I know that moment I left France to follow your glory was when I had set in my mind that I'd fallen in love. I love you as much as a man could possibly show.
While King Arthur saw the truth in his eyes, she couldn't help but look to the side after he had stated his love. Instead, she backed away closer to her bed, knowing full well that the only response she could give would cut deeper than a sword.
I hear you. I hear your heart, Lancelot. Believe me, you're one of the greatest knights that Camelot has ever had. You matter a great deal to me. However, I believe you know my answer already to your request.
Why? Why can't you understand my feelings? Do you know how my stomach churns when seeing you with that foreign pansy? He is no knight. He is not even a man yet. A green boy who lacks the authority and will of being a ruler.
Lancelot, I beg you, calm down. It was far too late to calm the heart of an agitated knight.
No! How can you not see that the country will shatter because of this? Is this the first step of foreign control? Why don't we just run away together? We take a ship and go to some faraway island where no thought of kingship or rule will plague our minds. It would be a life of peace.
You know that my destiny is not to spend my days as an outcast, away from my people. You should know better than that. Your duty has always been to be my knight. We might share camaraderie, but nothing beyond that bound. Okay, I can't pronounce it. Look at Gawain.
Yep.
Gallant and imposing. He is the definition of what it means to follow the king's rule. How could you, another one of my knights, come to this?
Serving you has been one of my life's greatest glories. I would never trade the experience for anything.
Then why do you protest so much, Lancelot? Look at the greatness we were able to accomplish. A stable kingdom. Many rulers would trade their own lives for something as great as that.
I do not just desire a perfect kingdom, my king. We as humans desire more than just a road to walk on, but also someone to accompany us down that same road. King Arthur, please, exchange a life of duty to one of you can forge yourself.
The day I pulled Excalibur, I cast away the shell of a human Lancelot. You know this better than anyone. You know this because you have served under me so many years. I am not human. My desires are not directed to human wants, but rather to one for my kingdom. I am marrying Prince Arslan, not out of love, but for the power that my kingdom will receive.
When Sir Tristan said that the king cannot empathize with human emotions, he was right. How can you instill your values in a knight who cannot even care for? You're going down a path I cannot follow and reject. The latest decision you took has turned a fraction of your knights against you. That boy is but an outsider who does not even have actual powers, just borrowed by his father.
I'm sorry you feel that way. My decision is final. The duty to my kingdom is stronger than the wanting human love.
Lancelot, now raising himself off his knee, began exiting the doorway, knowing full well what the day tomorrow would hold, how much blood would run.
A duty to your kingdom. How can a kingdom survive if the ruler is not happy? It is a destined path of self-destructive ideals.
With the final remark, Lancelot walked away from his king and his duty. As he continued, he did not turn back once, as his feelings he had held for the king were stomped out as a flame would. Morgan Le Fay's words were pounding in his eardrums. Turn on the kingdom and instead follow a king who has more empathy for her knights. King Arthur was too perfect of a king. She was a divine being now, and could not empathize with the common man. He could hear the door creak and close. His destiny was now correct and true, that he must free his king from the restrictions of the divine. Act 7. Arslan felt his morning fly by. The first moment he woke up, he had been assaulted by court helpers and helped him into the proper clothing a groom was supposed to wear. The moment he closed his eyes and opened them up once more, he was standing at the largest chapel Camelot had to offer. Beautiful white banners hung from the highest points of the building, which shared the insignia of his and King Arthur's knights. Behind him stood both Narcissus and Darun, two handsome men who had attracted not only the attention of the commoners of this city, but as well as the queens and princesses of the invited guests from all around the world. Narcissus leaned into Arslan's ear. It would be wise to make the best impression on these foreign nobles, perhaps future alliances for Pars. The eyes that judged him grew in numbers as Arslan waited for his bride to enter through the chapel. As if on cue, King Arthur entered in an elegant dress of white. As she walked through those large doors, the sun shines from behind her. Only then and there, Arslan felt that he was marrying a divine goddess. Her footsteps gentle, movement graceful, and music being played by none other than Sir Tristan and his harp brought silence to the chapel. The man helping her down the aisle who would give away King Arthur was Sir Bedivere, a loyal knight who always sought the best for the king. Arslan felt an anxiety crawling up his neck as he looked to his side, opposite to the side of Pars. The knights who stood adjacent to them were Sirs Gawain and Lancelot. There was something that Arslan saw in Lancelot's eyes that worried him. The moment their eyes met, the purple-armored knight looked away. Was it from shame or anger? King Arthur replaced his field of view as he stared at his wife. The woman was radiating beauty, something he could not reciprocate. As the priest walked towards the center between the two of them, a large goblet was brought out on the side of Pars, and on the Briton side came out wine. It was one of the traditions of Pars to enter the new year with this tradition. Arslan held the goblet as King Arthur poured the wine. After the items had been filled, Arslan raised the goblet into the air.
The new year brings a tide of new friendship and love. I hope that the alliance between Pars and Camelot is an eternal one. I graciously thank the chance that King Arthur has given me, and look forward to the many joys in our lives together.
With the final word completed, he drinks a gulp of the acidic wine. Later, passing it to his king who mimics the action. Two servers take away the items as they face one another, the priest now opening his Bible. Arslan could not tell what it was from this priest, but he held a sinister face. "Dearly beloved,"
Stop this.
a voice shouted throughout the proceedings as all turned their attention to the knight whose honor had been sullied and held nothing to lose. Sir Lancelot, the brave knight, walked forward.
I cannot stand any longer to watch the two of you go through with this. I object to this wedding. I object to all of it.
In one swift action, the mighty sword erendite was unsheathed and pointed at Arslan, an unwavering soul that refused to back down and could only be matched by one of equal skill.
I challenge you, Prince of Pars. Duel for the heart of King Arthur.
King Arthur turned to her right in anger and slapped him across the face. The events transpiring today would surely be written in the textbooks to come. A red mark was left on Lancelot's left cheek, but the pain was insurmountable to what ached in his heart. The sword was still raised, and the duel was still being offered. Narcissus saw the situation unfold and raised his hand to cut the tension. Regardless of the protest that King Arthur had, the knight knew what he wanted. "Prince Arslan, it is my advisal that you accept the challenge of Sir Lancelot, and send a representative such as when Daryun fought in Sindhura. This challenge, in front of the people of Camelot, can only be decided through blood." Arslan saw in the knight's eyes that there was only hatred. In no lifetime would Lancelot forgive him for stealing the love of his life. All the prince could do was nod, and Daryun walked in front of erendite, pushed it aside from the tip of his spear. The priest took a few steps away, and cautioned the happy married couple to do the same. A circle was formed as the attendees, knights, and aides all watched in preparation. The final duel that would settle Camelot was about to begin. Now.
The knights of this land all proved to be reckless. We were attacked by one of your own in the streets. But it is to my surprise, I do not see the same rash knight here at this wedding. What is the meaning of this, O honorable knight?
You sully the name of the knights that have ever existed. You are nothing more than your prince's puppet. If it were not for you, that boy would be missing inches of his shoulder. King Arthur, on the other hand, is braver than most men and fights them herself. What does that say about a cowardly prince such as yours?
It means that my prince has placed enough faith in me to know that I will be the victor of our duel. That is what it is. There means to be a knight, to act as the sword, not to disobey your king or do whatever you want. You have broken the code of knighthood, and for that your legends will paint you as a traitor to your own people.
Me? A traitor? How ridiculous. The people will look upon me as the savior of Camelot, the knight who freed the foreign invasion of Persian forces.
An awfully bold claim. I think the overseers of this wedding knows your true colors now. Traitor is knight.
I'll decorate the battlements of this castle with your head stump.
Two knights dashed to the center of the circle. Sir Lancelot of the Round Table was one of the most renowned fighters this kingdom had to offer, and to fight Daryun, the strongest fighter of Pars, could only be defined as an epic battle. Lancelot's techniques were much different than Mordred's, as her fighting style was an orangutan slamming her tree trunk down on her opponent until they gave way. Lancelot was as smooth as water when it came to drawing blood. Daryun for a moment was taken aback by how easily the knight could sneak past the jabs. Once more, he raised his spear parallel to his body to block an incoming slash to his abdomen. This time, the blade did not connect with his pole, and felt the steel blade begin to puncture through his right thigh. Immediately, he used the spear to jump back further than he had predicted, standing but a few inches in front of Arslan.
Daryun, are you alright?
Do my eyes deceive me? I could have sworn his blade had made contact with my spear. Is he so fast he can make an afterimage of him appear?
This enemy is stronger than any you have faced. With the strength of Sir Gawain, the bloodlust of Mordred, and the speed of King Arthur, Lancelot is famed to be the most strongest knight in Camelot. However, I think you already know how to beat a chivalrous right. Am I correct, Daryun?
Regardless of who he is and what actions he has taken today, he is still a knight, one who will face their opponent head on.
Daryun smirked at how Lancelot raised Erendite once more, the blade now shining brightly, illuminating the chapel in a blue aura.
Is this how knights from Pars conduct themselves? Whispering, conniving.
I'm going to cut your tongue.
With the last word uttered, Daryun raised the spear over his head and flung it straight at the knight. One decisive javelin throw that would pierce through the knight's armor. Lancelot, being the proud warrior he was, swung his blade to match the ferocity of the black spear, and slashed through the center in one swing. Erendite hungered for more as the Black Knight burst forward, sword in hand to match the mighty knight's emanating power.
You are a paper tiger in front of a storm, Black Knight. Leave my kingdom!
Erendite came down with the same strength that only Mordred could hold in her hands. However, just before contact, Daryun did not block the impact straight on, but used his blade to parry Erendite to his left. Those few seconds would hold the deciding blow, as Daryun raised his right fist to slam straight into Lancelot's handsome face.
Does this man intend to curse me with an ugliness by knocking a few teeth out of my mouth? Try it, and I'll return the favor by lopping off your head.
Lancelot stood firm to take the punch, as it would leave Daryun's abdomen exposed to Erendite's edge. However, as the punch neared closer, the knight's hand opened to catch a falling knife in the air. Before he even had time to react, the hand clamped on his knife and tore through Sir Lancelot's throat. The blue light of his blade vanished, and both fell the last vestiges of his traitorous insurrection. Daryun turned back to face his prince with the same confidence he had. This brief moment of fortune turned sour as a horn could be heard coming from the doors of the chapel. Upon the single horse was a Gravian. Behind him could be seen hundreds of men, wearing the same insignia Arslan remembered at the street market. King Arthur, it has come to the attention of the council that your rule has become corrupted by these forces. Camelot has no need of outside help or control. Men, seize this king and this sorry excuse of a prince. At once, the witnesses of the wedding who sat in the benches ran through any of the exits they could find. Sir Gawain stepped before his knight, now directing his anger at this new enemy. Likewise, Daryun raised his sword at the wave of enemies who were beginning to charge straight towards them, until suddenly, a new horn bellowed out through the air. This call was not native to Camelot. Who had come? Throughout the city, an army of horseback Pars soldiers ran through, killing the enemy insurgents. Pars' commanders Give and Jashuant were the first to break through the enemy formation. Just outside of the chapel, a sea of blood stained the halls as the insurgents were taken by surprise. A Gravian, not knowing where to turn, panicked by leading his horse back to the outside doors, where he was met with a volley of arrows. The day of rebellion had been stomped into the ground. The marriage ceremony had been placed on hold as the fighting mercilessly spilled into the next morning. Hundreds of knights had fallen just because of love. Could it all have been avoided? After a few days of fighting, cleaning, praying, a proper wedding had been set for King Arthur and Prince Arslan. As the two became husband and wife, we now look upon the ship that would leave the ports of Camelot, where we see Narcissus, Arslan, and King Arthur bidding their farewells. As they all stand on the wooden ship, they think on the prior events of what had happened. Camelot, seeing as how it had lost so many men, would be in fine need of new soldiers. Daryun had been giving a request to join the Round Table, but unfortunately for King Arthur, Daryun rejected flatly. Daryun's most important role, his primary role in his entire life, was to continue serving Prince Arslan. Even when he fought Mordred and even when he fought Lancelot, Daryon was always there to protect his king, as a knight should. Regardless on that, Arslan learned of the plot that Narcissus had left behind. On the day that they left, around midnight, ports of Gilon were filled once again with soldiers of Pars, sailing to Camelot right behind, perhaps a day or two, behind Arslan. The reasoning for this was simple. King Arthur had taken notice of several naysayers in her court. Some included Mordred, others included Lancelot. Agravian was the most guilty of all. As Narcissus and King Arthur finally mended a plan together, they created a marriage. It was an agreement between Arslan and Arthur to marry. To Arslan, it seemed like he was going to be married, and his life had been set straight. However, he did not know of the ploy that was happening underneath, with only Arthur knowing of the true intentions that she had. The naysayers of the court moved their heads forward, and finally, when the day came, they had made their true colors shown. That is how several of the knights of the Round Table fell. And because of that, Camelot was now slightly disturbed. But as it were, things recuperate. They always do. In a small, brief conversation that Arslan and Arthur have at the very end of this story, they look towards the sea and look at the bright side of things. Marriage has been formed, 2 kingdoms have been created into one, and now Arslan can finally return back to his homeland to try to aid his father. Regardless of the uncertain future of what could happen, Arslan knew that he had his friends and his now wife behind him, supporting him, doing everything that he could to change his father's mind on the issue of slavery. Two stood there, watching the expansive sea before their eyes. Arslan asked King Arthur, "Are you happy?" King Arthur could only look up and smiled. "Happy. I am relieved that my kingdom is safe. I am also happy that you were not harmed throughout this civil war." Arslan was put to rest. However, he still had a question in the back of his head. "I have a question," he asked cautiously. "When I saw Mordred's face in the marketplace, she looked eerily similar to yours. Is there a reason for that?" Arthur let out a small chuckle and looked towards her husband, almost telling him it's all right. "Do not be alarmed. If you think I have had a previous marriage, then let your heart be still. It was through a certain witch that allowed my genes to create a homunculi, Mordred. I never considered her my child because that would mean she would have the right to rule in my place. As you saw for yourself, her heart was cruel, ruled by emotion." Arslan was put to rest. The thoughts of emotion were in his head, conflicting against the king's perfect rule. "Do you still only rule in the same perfect manner, King Arthur? Or has your heart opened a fraction? There is nothing wrong with letting a king rule through emotion as well." Arthur looked up once more, but this time, instead of the same blank stare that she would give him, she responded, "It is my duty, Arslan. My rule is for the sake of the people. You cannot ask me to place one thing before the other. However, I will take into consideration the light of this new evidence and see how different it is. Don't expect a full change." Whether the king wanted to believe it or not, Arslan and his humanity was enough to give Arthur a look into her life and why it was so perfect and what faults it had. A world where she did not raise the holy sword and just stayed as a normal girl. The thoughts were put to rest, Arslan thought. They live in a world where that didn't happen. Arthur had taken up the sword Excalibur, and this was their reality, and he would have to make do with it. As they continued to look out to the sea in silence, Arslan, before even forgetting, raised his voice and looked at Arthur with a smile. "Before I forget, I have one last thing to give you. Found it on the day we were in the marketplace with Daryun, and I knew I had to give this to you. Consider it another wedding gift." Arthur looked at him, puzzled, and looked at his hands. In Arslan's hands were a child's toy, a stuffed lion. King's face was covered in a deep red as she took the lion, speechless. From the docks came Narcissus once more. "The preparations are complete. I have received word that your father has just begun his march to Ecbatana, and we sail today. Hopefully, if we make it out by sunrise, we should meet him on the battlefield." Arslan, now proud, happy, content with everything that happened, looked towards the rest of his men in the other ships and raised his hand. "Then we will set sail. Let us take back our home." As the men all rallied into dozens of ships, Arslan exchanged one last moment with his wife. "I will be back, my king." Arthur looked and could see the very notable change from a boy to a man. "And I will be expecting you, no matter how long I wait." One sweet kiss was all Arslan was given, as both the Knights of Pars and Camelot watched. That ends our story here. Tale of two kings, one in search for aid, and the other on the brink of collapse. Through the vines of evil and conspiring, we find that love and duty are what cut through the forest of uncertainty. We may never know the future of these kingdoms, or even of these two lovers, but one thing is certain. Prince of Pars is one who will always fulfill his oath, one who will never betray. On the other, King of Camelot will continue her duty to her people. Two lives that were destined to never meet, now wrap their hearts together in one divine union. Love is a fickle thing. They drive us to actions of evil, birth an idea of hope. The curtains close as the ships sail away from the ports of Camelot. Prince Arslan now looks forward to his home, with Daryun and Sir Gawain by his side, his allies all across the deck as they raise their arms to claim victory. It is in this brief moment that Arslan turns around and sees the King of Camelot, not waving, not cheering, but with a smile on her face. The journey has just begun and has been wrought with blood, but as the dawn rises, we carve our own future. The eyes he was so scared of, the eyes that at first petrified him when he entered the throne room, now retained a semblance of humanity. King Arthur had learned what it meant to be human. Her eyes now shined brightly, seeing that something had changed in her. At times like these, words cannot come close to expressing an emotion. All Arslan felt in these eyes, these three traits: compassion, care, and finally, love. Well, I think that's a wrap with everything. For all those who paid attention through and through and listened and enjoyed the voice acting, thank you. This is a personal thank you from creator to you, the audience. You have stayed this long. I feel very strongly about this entire project. I'd like to thank the voice actors the amateur voice actors who for some reason decided to let me use their voices for this video playthrough. And I feel like my true vision for this entry was created because of their help. They just took the lines that I wrote for them and said them. I'm surprised they even trusted me that far, but they did. And I have no other words except thank you. Just a big thank you. Regardless of who is listening, whether this be in a year, for some reason you're probably stalking this video, or right now. Just a very heartwarm thank you. I don't know if I'll make another entry like this again, based on how much I had to go looking for people and just juggling 30,000 things. But this was fun. This is what I believe is a big part of Amino as a whole, really, when you think about it. human-to-human connections that we make with everyone is really why we only come back. I mean, I enjoyed this entire thing, and giving it my final listen after it's all been done, before it's been posted, I can't help but feel very proud at this work that has been created. Highly recommend you get into both series. They're really good. You already know me, you know what I'm going to say about Fate, but Heroic Legend of Arslan, also excellent. Regardless of that, I just hope that all of you have a great day. Stay safe, and I might see you on the next time. Take care.